So, hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen and friends. I see a lot of friendly faces, and when I look at the attendance, I also see a lot of friendly names. I would like to welcome you on behalf of EFCCA, the European Federation of Crohn and Colitis Association. My name is Marko Perovic. I am member of the board of EFCCA and also an active member in the Serbian IBD Association. This is a live and online event, so in case of issues, please write in the chat box also if you lose the sound for this event. This is our second webinar on EFCCA patient talks. The first one was related to IBD and COVID and drug supplies in that terms. This webinar is meant to discuss the issues that COVID has created, ways in which COVID is affecting not only health aspects, but also psychological and social or psychosocial aspects of everyday life of people who live with IBD, and in that way to discuss the effects this recent global crisis has had on our well-being. Today, we would like to discuss with you topics that include, for example, what are the ways in which our IBD community collectively and individually has responded and has been coping with the lockdown and all the difficulties and changes and challenges we've seen around the COVID crisis. But also more particularly, what is the meaning and the impact and the actual influence of the isolation that most of us, if not all, have been faced over the previous period of time. And then when we look forward and when we think about what's next and where do we go in terms of going back to normal life, back to normality, what does it mean to go back to normality? And then finally, we want to touch upon and share opinions and reflections on the role of patient associations during this crisis and the role that they have been playing, are playing, and will be playing in future. And this is also where we would like to hear from you, the participants to this webinar. Because this is a live thing, we hope that technology will be kind to us and good to us. We hope that we will have stable internet connection and that the platform will also be good. So fingers crossed. But I would like to give you a few instructions, so to say, in terms of the housekeeping for this event. First of all, just in case you are connected from your laptops, hopefully you have headsets or earsets, because you will be it will be easier for you to follow and more pleasant in a way. In case, to make sure that you can hear us well, you can also turn off or mute any other sounds from your mobile phones, from your other applications that may be running on your computers. Also, to avoid background noises, everyone's mics and webcams are at this point turned off. During the webinar, we will be happy to pass floor to participants, and when you write to us in the chat box, we will activate your microphone and your webcam. And just the last kind of note on housekeeping is that in case at any point in time you would like to share a comment or a question or a reflection or an opinion, please do so right in the chat box. We will be keeping an eye on the chat box and try to respond to everything you write during the last section, hopefully, of this event. Our event is only meant to last for 45 minutes. We have seen some delay. We will compensate that, certainly. Now I would like to present our speakers today. Today we have 3 speakers on this EFCCA patient talk on psychosocial impact of lockdown in IBD patients. We have our 2 colleagues and friends, lovely ladies from IBD community, Sanna Lonnfors and Vakouftsi. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Vaso, but if I'm not, forgive me. And then we also have Dr. Yoram, inspector of the St. Mark's Academic Institute in London, today with us. Dr. Yoram is a psychiatrist who works closely and follows the gastroenterology, and we are looking forward to hearing from him as well. I also see that now we have quite a high attendance. We will be open throughout this event for also other participants who have registered to join this event and talk to us during the next 45 minutes or so. I will make a brief introduction as to what we want to achieve today and what is really the issue that we are looking at, because we know that the COVID crisis has really affected IBD community and people living with IBD, not only in terms of the vulnerability to infection. And we have seen that a lot of IBD patients across Europe and beyond have confirmed that they are afraid and really concerned about getting infected, but also passing on the infection to others. So we know, and we have discussed the drug supply last time, and we have seen these health concerns among IBD patients. But what we have not discussed so far is really how this affects our everyday life and how this affects the psychosocial dimension of our life and our well-being. We have seen that we have seen anxiety over uncertainties, whether there would be medicines, whether we would be well, whether we would get infected, and if we do get infected, what happens next? Would that leave serious harm and damage? Whether we would survive in such cases? Uncertainty over possible flares due to stress and further anxiety. We've also seen anxieties on whether we can access help and assistance that we need, and also factors of stress of what happens next, and how do we go back to normal, and how do we return to work and to normality, whatever normality is. But we are, I think, particularly marked by the sense and the feeling of isolation. This isolation is really not entirely new for people living with IBD. We have seen this in many IBD cases. So what I would like, for example, to start with is this sense of isolation, what it means for us, how do we deal with it, what are the strategies, the coping strategies that we have, and what does the lockdown and the related challenges, how do we cope with the lockdown and related challenges. With this topic, I would like to invite Vaso to give us an insight into her life during the COVID and during the lockdown in the previous months. Vaso, the floor is all yours.
Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here with you today, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Vaso, I'm from Greece. I'm the General Secretary of HELLESCC, the Greek IBD Society. So let's start with the topic. No one knew what would follow when the new coronavirus had begun. The word pandemic was not a word we used often until recently. The word itself causes feelings of fear, anxiety, sadness, and many more negative emotions, which we all, to a greater or lesser extent, experienced during lockdown and quarantine. We need to have this conversation while the emotions are still fresh, while we are anxious, while we are worried about our old life and our health. Everything around is different. This modified daily life makes many of us feel isolated and even scared. Chronic patients may have been prepared to some degree because it was not the first time we had to stay at home for an indefinite period of time and without knowing when we would be better to return to our daily lives. So we understand exactly what people were experiencing when the quarantine began. All these emotions are normal. I have gone all through of these when I was diagnosed and my life was turned upside down. As a patient with underlying diseases, like many of you, maybe most of you, I'm at a greater risk of serious illness from the COVID-19. Various emotions pass in front of me: fear, horror, anxiety, but also a bright ray of light. From the beginning of the lockdown, I knew I needed something to help me manage this situation. So I found a lot of creative activities, from playing music, which is my profession, to cooking or watching movies and reading books. All these things worked as a distraction from the gloomy reality of the pandemic. Already from the first days of the lockdown, many of what we take for granted did not exist. Many simple things look like luxuries, but it wasn't just the lockdown. Patients' routine have changed. Hospital appointments have been suspended. Treatments were postponed in some cases. Surgeries have not been performed, and access to hospital has generally been a major feat, and there was a little misconception that health problems that were not related with COVID-19 could wait for later. High-risk patients like me and other IBD patients watched with anxiety what was happening and is still happening around us. But we also watched the discussion about how much our lives worth and the importance of protecting them. In some cases, people with underlying diseases were something like acceptable losses, and that was sad. With that in mind, I would like to welcome you to another world that you may not have thought of until recently. During the lockdown, we were all forced to isolate ourselves. For me and many chronic patients, isolation periods are common and they are not never easy. This life for me and many other chronic patients is very similar to our daily life, our normal daily life, and not of the pandemic era. Obviously, isolation is a big issue, but it will end. But when the quarantines are over and we return to our normal lives, I hope we don't forget how we felt during this period, the time when nothing was given. And please don't forget that for some of us, normal life is not exactly what we imagine, nor what we sometimes saw. Can we use these experiences to build a kind world together? Let's keep some of our new behaviors, these little solidarity behaviors. Kindness and empathy are the new rules. Now we all know what it's like for people to turn upside down. Maybe after all this, we will be better people because life is a gift. And maybe we can learn some positive things from this period. There are so many opportunities to improve our relationship with other people. Caring is a part of human nature, and this forced isolation has made us realize how important it is to all of us. Suddenly, we appreciated the environment around us in a whole new way. Out of nowhere, healthy people were beginning to see the impending effects of the pandemic. Perhaps in the middle of the unknown and in this condition, we have truly begun to love and care for other people. That's my opinion and a little bit of words to this discussion, and thank you again for the invitation.
Vasu, thank you very much for sharing your experience and giving us insight into your everyday life over the past months. I think it's very important to kind of reiterate the role of routine and habits and how they change, and also finding kind of opportunities in this new situation, and creativeness, and certainly that we all have coping strategies to deal with. But what is it? And this is maybe the question for Dr. Inspector. When you see your patients during the COVID crisis, what are their main concerns in your opinion? And what do you tell them? How do you reassure them? What do you recommend? Do you have any tools or strategies that you can pass on to them on how to deal with the crisis and the isolation during the lockdowns? Dr. Inspector, the floor is yours. I just need to ask you to turn on your microphone. You will do that by pressing the first button, the microphone icon, until it turns blue.
Okay. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, Marko, and thank you for inviting me to this important meeting. Following what Vas was describing, I think we can be in a physical isolation, but we don't need necessarily to be in a psychological isolation. I always, in my talks, bring this experiment that was done with mice by Henri Levory, who was a French a surgeon and philosopher, and he took a mouse, put him in a cage, gave the mouse an electrical current that was disturbing but not dangerous. The door of the cage was open, the mouse escapes, nothing happens to it. Then he took the mouse, put him in the cage, closed the door, gave him the current. This time the mouse could not escape but was alone. And this mouse became ill. He started to lose its hair and even developed a peptic ulcer and vomited blood. Then he took two mice, put both of them in a cage, closed the door, gave them the current. They could not escape, but they were not alone, and nothing happened to them. So if you have another mouse in your cage, you'll be better. And we share 90% of our genes with mice, so we're quite close to them. So this is in a way the message of really to have a companion. The Nobel Prize winner for literature, José Saramago, the Portuguese writer, wrote a beautiful sentence. He said, being alone doesn't mean that you are lonely. Being lonely is be detached from an inner companion within yourself. So even if you don't have the other mouse physically outside, you can have an internal mouse that supports you. So when Vas speaks about playing the music, you become a good companion to yourself. So you're alone, but you're not lonely. So this is really, as an introduction, when Marko, you speak about a tool, I think if you can have a companion to speak about all this, this is immediately helpful. Don't stay with all your feelings alone. Share it with people that you can share. So you cannot escape, but you're not alone, and it really does something to the psyche and the body, like we saw with the mice. And if you don't have someone to speak, try to be a good companion to yourself. So do things that you love, play the music, read the books, write. So this is really the role of companionship. if I want to use another amplification in the Bible, there is this Psalm 22 when David says, "God, oh God, why have you forsaken me?" And Jesus quoted it on the cross. And in John 14, there is a description of what happens in your body when you are alone. And David says, "I'm poured out like water, my bones are out of joint, my heart melted like wax, it melted into the midst of my bowels." So it really, everything goes into the gut when we're alone. And the next chapter, there is this beautiful sentence, "Even if I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I won't be afraid because you are with me." Again, God is the companion, but just shows that we need a companion. So obviously this period changed a bit the quality of the companionship, because it's not like being together in the cage physically. And I always say that my patients are also my second mice, because if I have a true meeting with a person, I feel better. So definitely I miss this physical camaraderie, but I realized that, thank God for the technology, we can still provide companionship through the phone, through the Zoom, the Skype, and some people even feel more open to speak on the phone. So new patients that I see, and we continue the assessments. I just now work with somebody on the phone that has a social phobia of going out with his stomach bag. So I didn't see him in person, but I can still work and we can still do something valuable. So I think it all, you know, it's a challenge, but I realize that if you keep this companionship, if you keep this dialogue, you can do a lot. So obviously there are unique fears now to the COVID. For example, patients that have, let's say, an obsessive compulsive anxiety about contamination alongside the IBD, for example. So this intensified everything. And then they realize that when they're more anxious, sometimes there are more bowel symptoms.
Yeah, we have seen that. I mean, I can speak for myself. I can find myself also in some of the words that you're saying. So thank you, Dr. Inspector, very much for this very insightful intervention from your end, from a side of a specialist who does deal with these issues. Thank you for reminding us about the difference between physical and social distancing, and understanding that the one does not necessarily imply the other.
Exactly.
And also for reminding us that of a sense of a companionship and the fact that we can benefit from the other, or physically from another person, or going back into looking at how we feel. It is probably, in my understanding, a way of self-empowerment and self-strengthening to cope with this situation both through companionship and through acknowledgement and sharing of personal emotions, feelings, perceptions, and the similar. So thank you very much for your intervention now. And Vasa has mentioned returning to normality. Now, I mean, looking down the road, we know that as the situation is currently managed better than at the start of the crisis, and we are seeing stabilization in different areas, and we do expect to be going back to normal. I think that normal for the general population, for the most, will be simply a resumption of some activities. But what does it mean to return to normal for a person living with IBD, and what indeed is normality for a life of an IBD person whose normality must have been different. So this is my question for Sanna. She will be speaking today as a person who lives with IBD, and maybe draws from her experience and her kind of insight to try to respond to this question. Sanna, the floor is all yours. And hello and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so how Vasil was saying already, what is normal and what is normal for us? And like she said also, we are already kind of familiar with isolation because of our IBD. There are periods in our lives where we have to stay at home because of our IBD. It's nothing new to us. Now, of course, it was a different situation because it was pretty much the same for everybody. And so it was kind of like a double lockdown for us. It was the IBD isolation that kind of forces us to stay at home sometimes, plus the COVID-19 on top of that. And I have to say, for me personally, I mean, I can't say I was happy about it, but there was a small positive notion that I was kind of thinking, well, now everybody will understand what it's like when you have to stay at home, and the reason for it is something that you absolutely can't control. I don't know if healthy people took it like that, but I thought maybe now they will finally understand. And now coming back to normal, of course, for those healthy people, they just go back to their normal lives. We go back to our IBD isolation. So many of us who have bad symptoms, we still might have to stay at home, and it's kind of like nothing changes. And even if your IBD is not that bad, and it's okay to move, go out again and go to grocery stores, whatever, see your friends, it's not exactly the same. At least for me, there's kind of a new normal now. Like, it's always in the back of your head. Is there going to be another lockdown? Is there going to be a second wave of the coronavirus? And even if not, like, can I see this person? And you know, when you go to a grocery store and somebody comes too close to you, at least for me, I get really kind of nervous. I really don't like it. It makes me really uncomfortable, which, you know, this is a feeling that wasn't there before. It's really something new. And if I'm out somewhere and then I realize I didn't wash my hands for a long time, that also gives me kind of an uncomfortable feeling. So it's really a completely new normal situation. And especially if you're immunosuppressed because of your IBD medication, of course, then you have to be extra careful. So it's kind of back to normal, and then again, it's not. Like, it's not the same as it was before. And like right now, nobody can say if it ever will be. So it's kind of a new situation that we just have to kind of roll with, and we have to adapt. Then again, us who have IBD, we've had to adapt to so many other things already in our lives that I'm even thinking maybe it's easier for us. Who knows? But in any way, in any case, this question about going back to normal, this is, I think, what it comes down to. Like, it's not the same normal as it was before. It's a different situation.
Thank you, Sanna. Thank you for giving us your perception of what this normality means. I think we all, or maybe not all of us, but I think we share this concern. And I also think that perhaps going back to normality is really moving straight to new normality, whatever it means, with whatever challenge this implies, or the new challenges we will be facing. I am hoping that Dr. Inspector is still with us, because I would like to hear from him on what would be the ways of facilitating or helping people who live with IBD to, in a way, step into this new phase that we call the new normality. But I don't see Dr. Inspector online, so he probably got disconnected. In the meantime, I wonder if Vasa has any impression or reaction just quickly on what Sanna was mentioning, because I heard you, Vasa, touching upon the issue of the normality. So would you share just a few thoughts with us based on also what Sanna mentioned, and just very briefly?
First of all, I totally agree with Sanna, and as a person, I always look ahead and always see a bright ray of light behind the clouds, and maybe that's my mechanism to deal with difficulties. I accepted some time ago that my illnesses would never leave me. I can continue my way to improvement, but what I experienced as normal years ago may have never come again. That was a relief for me, because for a few years I waited for the miracle treatment to live my life. My aim since then is to live better, to live more fully. The challenge is very similar with what we all face now: how to move forward and stop waiting to return to our normal. I think we need to find ways to live now with safety as our first priority. And of course, I want us to overcome this crisis as quickly as possible. And as I know that my return to normal and your return to normal may be far away from others, I know it's difficult for all of us to return to normal, to live, to be safe.
Vasa, thank you very much. I think there is encouragement in your words. This is how I feel it, and this is in a way the message and the vibration I'm getting from your intervention. So thank you very much for sharing this insight on your end. Since Dr. Inspector is unfortunately not online, I suggest we move on, and when he is back, we will catch him and get some more reactions from him. When EFCCA carried out a survey on perceptions on related to COVID and IBD, it was, I think, in the midst of the crisis. It was early April. Close to 4,000 people have responded, and I think member associations across Europe and also beyond Europe have really worked a lot to collect this information. And as was mentioned in the start, a vast majority, or at least majority of people who live with IBD are afraid of infection or infecting others. And we see a lot of worries regarding physical contact, and which then creates the need for physical distancing. But at least half of those who were interviewed during the survey have responded that they indeed think that there are ways in which they could address their worries and their anxieties and fears surrounding COVID. And when they were asked to indicate what would be their coping strategy, or what would be the way for them to deal with these fears and worries, around 40% of them stated that those were patient associations. So this indeed speaks about the important role of associations in providing coping strategies, in strengthening and empowering people with IBD to deal with these new challenges of new normality, or whatever we call it. So I see that Dr. Inspector is back with us now.
Yeah.
Welcome again. I was just saying, I was giving a description of the importance of the role of patient associations in creating coping strategies. And we would certainly love to hear from our friends and colleagues who are connected now. But before I give floor to those friends who are attending this event, perhaps just a quick reaction from Dr. Inspector, because I think this is also very important to hear from you, but really very briefly, about how you see the ways in which we can help patients return to new normality. How do you help a person to go back to new normality, or to step into new normality with IBD after the COVID isolation?
So sorry, I was disconnected. So I just see this slide about fear and habits. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, we can hear you well.
For a second. Yeah. So just to say that all these fears are actually a reaction to an abnormal situation. So hear me, Marko?
Yes, I can hear you well. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I hear you,
because the
Dr.
picture
Inspector
is a bit frozen. Okay, so what I said, that all these fears are actually normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Not to be afraid is not normal, because a life-threatening condition, and so anxiety are part of our every tool to avoid danger. So first of all, I think it's to normalize. I think in that sense, patients are not different from other people. I think it's a normal fear. It's really how to be able to find out what is an exaggerated anxiety or catastrophized anxiety, and what is a normal anxiety situation. Marko, do you hear me?
Dr. Inspector, I do hear you. You are breaking up. I think we are losing you at times. And the picture is frozen. So indeed, I think we were able to hear you well. And thank you also for clarifying the psychological aspects of our fear and anxiety of the new and the threatening. So I will now continue with maybe opening the floor to our friends and colleagues from across Europe and from patient associations, for their reactions or perceptions on how patient associations help cope with the IBD and COVID situation, and what is the role and what could be the role of patient associations in strengthening and empowering, or simply helping people who live with IBD to cope with the challenges, because we have seen that people who live with IBD in Europe, in our network, recognize patient associations as an important channel or an important mechanism of support to cope with the challenges we see. So now we would like to hear from you who are connected to this call. Would someone from the group be interested to show, to share with us their opinions and maybe some examples from your national association or from your country that you find relevant? I see Ruth from CCUK. So, Ruth, would you like to take the floor and maybe share with us some of the findings that CCUK has collected on the negative impact of COVID-19, or some of the ways in which you have addressed this? Okay, so I see Ruth typing. In the meantime, what we see is that the UK patients had the key concerns of UK patients were about leaving the house due to public toilet closures, concern about leaving the house due to increased risk of coronavirus complications, and the negative effects on mental health. So people are aware of the negative effects of that COVID creates for them, and the isolation. Another question that we have is also the role of telemedicine in improving the psychological support of people with IBD. So we see questions coming in. In the meantime, we're hoping Ruth will be able to connect or unmute her microphone. Let's see if this can happen. In the meantime, we also have a reaction that highlights the importance of relationship with other people. We have a question whether physical separation on the basis of COVID can influence negatively the future new normality for people. Dr. Inspector, what do you think about this? Do you think that this physical separation because of COVID will indeed negatively influence our future normality? Yes.
Yeah, I think physical hugs are very, very important, and love is a biological need. We all need that, definitely there is a deprivation of that sort. At the same time, I'm always very impressed by human creativity and by our capacity, resilience to find ways to be close to each other. So hopefully, at some point, this thing will resolve. So I obviously, if you speak about oxytocin and the hormone that makes us feel good, which is a result of contact and hugs, there's no really substitute for that. But at the same time, there are so many ways when we can become close to each other and actually feel more cozy with each other, that I think that, I don't know, I'm not a prophet, but I don't think it will have a long-term effect. It's really how to survive this period with alternative ways to be close to each other. What we do here in this webinar is exactly that, you know.
Thank you very much for answering this question. I might have another question for you, and I wonder if you have had a chance to engage in telemedicine to improve the psychological or psychosocial support for people with IBD. So has that been an issue? Have you experienced it? What do you think about it?
Can you clarify, Marko, what do you mean by telemedicine? So we work with Zoom and Skype. I don't know if it's a different thing.
I would assume that that telemedicine in this case could also imply using specialized assistance for providing specialized advice online or virtually or distantly to avoid physical contact. So this has also been.
I think, I think going back to what I said about the companionship, that every way of being in contact and being together and not being alone is good. So I think telemedicine can help. Sometimes we say that we want face-to-face thing, but somehow the telemedicine is even more face-to-face because there is this interesting intimacy of being completely facing the other. You miss the body language, but it's also an intimate companionship. So I think any form of companionship, of just not being alone with this, the only danger that it will become a substitute for the real contact, because maybe people feel more, it's more comfortable not to get out of the worried that people will prefer that than real contact. But I think it's a real danger because we are social people and we need touch, we need intimacy. So I don't think it will overcome this need. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us your opinion on this issue, and again reminding us on the need to share and increase companionship. I think we are now ready to connect Ruth Wakeman from City UK. Ruth, can we hear you?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi Ruth, loud and clear.
Lovely.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello everyone. It's really interesting discussion. Just wanted to say that great to hear from Sanna and Vaso, and we've had really similar comments in from people. So I think the point that for some people this has highlighted that they were already really isolated, and whereas other people think that their lives may return to normal, for some people they feel that they're never going to return to normal. So I've just got a few quotes that I was going to share, if that's okay. So, for example, someone wrote into us to say that the pandemic's really highlighted the loneliness that they felt before the pandemic, and that having to stay at home didn't make much difference to their life, and that's made them feel that they really need to think about their life, and so that they can address this when the pandemic is over. And some of the other comments, in the UK, people were classified as extremely clinically vulnerable, and somebody said being given that label because of their Crohn's has really changed how they think about themselves, and they feel that that's going to affect them longer term and has had a really severe impact on their mental health, and that they feel they're no longer safe to leave the house. So some really sort of strong comments about how labels as part of the pandemic have made people fear. So I just thought that might be interesting to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth, for sharing this very insightful findings from your association's survey, and thank you also for sharing some of the concerns of patients in the UK. It certainly does. There is certainly a lot of similarities and commonalities among patients around the network. And I think this sense of safety based on public health instructions and labeling is very, very important for all of us. Also, when we consider how do we go then further on into our new normality, and how empowered and strong we are to deal with the new normality, having been labeled as a high risk. So thank you. I don't know if we have any other questions or comments. I don't see any new in our public chat box. So I am assuming that we have reached basically the end of this discussion. When we have shared the information on this webinar to our EFCCA network and member associations, we really have received, and we are still receiving, many examples of activities which are implemented by associations in relation and in response to COVID crisis, from surveys to support activities and so on. And we would also like to kind of remind the group that we are waiting for more such examples from others as well, and we will keep on receiving them. And the next issue of the EFCCA magazine will also feature a section on the practices and the activities that member associations have been implementing in response to COVID, so that these experiences can be shared and multiplied in a way, and so that eventually more and more people living with IBD could receive important and I would also say highly valued assistance from patient associations. Since I don't see any other comments, I will end here. We went a bit farther than what we expected. It's 5 p.m. sharp. I would like to thank everyone for their kind participation. I would like to thank Sanna and Vaso for sharing their personal experiences. I would like to thank Dr. Inspector for giving us insights into the psychological and psychotherapeutical issues of COVID situation. I think the isolation and the return or the new normality will be challenges ahead of us that we will need to find ways to deal with and to respond to them. I would like to thank also the participants who connected online to share their concerns and opinions, and also examples of how they deal either collectively or individually with this current situation. And I wish you all the best. Stay safe and let's stay connected. And hopefully talk to you soon. Before we go, a really special thanks also to our EFCCA office who made this all online event possible and made sure everything runs smoothly. So we stay united, we stand. Have a good day and see you soon, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.